Hey guys, Calandros here. So it's been a little while since I've done anything. I was during the holidays and stuff. It was kind of a little bit crazy, but when during the holidays my family came over and got me sick and my laryngitis came back. You still hear it a little bit, I guess, in my voice, but it's mostly gone now. Um, but I think I never really properly gotten over the initial bout that I had back in October. If you guys have been following the channel, so this time I got some medication stuff. I'm actually still on some steroids to kind of reduce the swelling and stuff, but should be back to close to 100% in about a week or two probably. Um, but it's pretty good right now. It's I don't have much range currently, so my sort of normal speaking voice is about uh, is about as good as it gets. Um, Certainly can't do any singing or anything right now. So, but this song that we're going to do today, and we're probably going to do a couple songs this week, maybe two or three songs, but this one was really cool because um, a lot of people had suggested this band to me. I've heard a ton about them, and but had never listened to them. So I tasked Damon um, with finding a list of songs for me, you know, and of course he took it as like a major project. So we went through all the albums and picked out about 10 songs, I think, or so, and sent that list over to Jen, who helped him come up with two songs that they gave me. And um, the song that Damon picked is the one that we're doing, which is "Will to Give." And the band is Woods of Ypres, I think is how you pronounce it. Should have looked that up before I did the video. But anyways, that song is the one that I ended up doing. I can't remember off the top of my head what the other song was, but I listened to them both once, uh, and this one was the clear winner for me in terms of the two right off the bat. Now I did subsequently, and I sort of made the decision right then that this was the one I was going to do. But I also did go back and listen to the other song three or four times, and it really grew on me. But there's a lot of things that I liked about this one a lot more because this one showcases a much more dynamic and diverse mix of sounds and styles, which the other song was much more probably lyrically the stronger song, maybe, but was more straight up doomy all throughout with, I believe, all clean vocals. There might have been a little tiny bit of um, extreme vocals in there, but it was mostly clean throughout. And Woods uses a lot of clean vocals, I've noticed. I've listened to other songs that were on that playlist since then. I asked him to send me the whole 10 song or whatever playlist that he had. And I noticed that a lot of their songs do have predominantly clean vocals. This one actually has a lot more black metal influence, I think, or just general extreme metal influence with a lot more shouting slash screaming, vocal fry, shouting, screaming, and stuff. Um, and we'll talk a little bit about that during the song because I think he really uses it to great effect, and it shows how strong of a singer he is. And how strong is maybe not the right word. Versatile, I would think, is probably the better word. How versatile of a singer he is. So we'll get into that a little bit. But as far as other bands this week, there's another band I really want to do this week, which is a band that was shown to me. Another one from Jen. This one, she had linked the song to me, and I immediately loved it. And I was like, I definitely want to do a reaction of this song because it's very unique. And then the other one that I wanted to do was a really cool one, which is a black metal band, a Native American black metal band, which is really cool. They're definitely, I mean, when you listen to them, they're black metal through and through. And more in the Emperor style, I would say, a little more atmospheric, less sort of true cult, but more like, atmospheric, but also incorporating so much of their own unique flavor from their culture, which is what's really cool about it. So I really want to do that band. I want it to be a surprise, so I'm not going to tell you who it is because there's a couple Native American black metal bands. I think these guys are probably the most well known, but I'll let you guys maybe try and figure out what it's going to be. Those of you guys who know me pretty well can probably guess which one it is. So, because I've been talking about this band for about a week or so. So, but anyways, let's jump into the song. It's about 7 minutes long. This will be probably a relatively long breakdown because I wrote up a whole musical piece and we're going to dive into the lyrics too. And I know Woods is a very strong band lyrically. You'll notice his style is very unusual, and we'll talk about that after the song. So let's go ahead and jump into it right now.
destination. There is only the journey.
Okay. All right, so there's a lot to get into with this, just like from the musical breakdown. So, like I said, I had this is obviously a song that I've listened to before. So, and like I said, this was kind of the immediate favorite I had, and I think for me, knowing how I respond to music and stuff, I think I really latched onto the riff at the end. And I think that was really what made the decision for me. I don't think it was ever really a choice with the other song, honestly, because the riff at the end just grabbed me so much. Um, so we kind of start with this almost tool-like acoustic melody. Actually, it reminds me a lot of the same chord progression that opens up Death Whispered a Lullaby by Opeth. And, so that to me was interesting because it's more of almost and I think it shows their doomy side, the Woods, their doomy side. Because, I mean, I think more than anything, they're a doom metal band. They have a lot of black metal influence, and they're oftentimes mentioned as being a black metal band, but I really think of them more, I mean, with all the different songs that I've heard, as being more of a doom metal band than anything. And actually, what I did want to say was the pronunciation, which I did look it up. It's Ypres is how it's pronounced. So I think I was pretty close when I said it earlier. I believe that's what I'd said. So Ypres. It's Dutch actually, or the like actual pronunciation is that's the French pronunciation, and they're a Canadian band, but it's it's a Belgian area, like so it's I believe there's references made to it as being one of the major battlegrounds for the First World War, which is an interesting choice. And I believe it was one of the larger battles of the First World War, but between the German and Allied forces. So there's a lot of historical significance in it. It makes you wonder why David chose that as a band name. But anyways, to get back to the breakdown of the actual song itself, there's after that sort of initial piece, which is like I said, almost very Opeth like. It brings us into more of like a doomy black metal sort of inspired. And I listed it here as a verse, but what I really quickly realized as we went throughout the song is this is a band that I feel very much like Vector does not write the music first. They write the lyrics first and then structure the songs around them. So as such, the lyrics are really more of a story or a poem as opposed to a traditional song structure. This song does not really have, there's one section that's repeated twice, and I'll call it out when we get to it, when we go over the lyrics. But it doesn't really have so much of a verse. There are parts that you could musically sort of designate as, okay, this is more of a chorus section, this is more of a verse section. And like I'll talk a little bit about that because this section that we're talking about here, there's a drum fill, and then the guitars drop out and you have the clean vocals, which I found very similar to early Black Sabbath or a little bit of Lane from Alice in Chains when he's sitting in his normal, almost a standard singing voice, not going, high up into his register, but like his just a sort of standard, lower singing voice. And I can definitely see some of that in there. And then this, as that verse sort of continues on, you get a little more of the doom stuff creeping in as it goes along. And there's like this nice little drum beat that kind of creeps in, and it builds up to kind of the 1 minute mark, and then there's sort of this little double bass section, and this is almost, musically speaking, somewhat of like a chorus, because this is repeated a couple times and it has a pretty noticeable like build up and conclusion. So this is kind of almost musically speaking like a chorus section, but vocally, all that happens over this section is just a scream. It's like it's like a couple screams, but there's no real words in it. It's just a scream. It's your typical sort of black metal type scream, right? And then at around 110, we have another major vocal shift because it goes to an almost Gojira-like shout, like a Fry shout. So it's like a raspy, if you've heard Gojira before, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Like Joe's vocals are more of like a, they're more of like a bellow, There's a lot of power behind it, but it's not like a scream. It's more of like he's using a lot of power in his voice, but there's not like, he's not going like ultra high or ultra low. It's not a growl either. It kind of sits in between. And I mentioned Fry because that's usually you're using what really, when people talk about Fry, I'm not a vocal coach or anything like that, but I do like to watch those reactions. So I picked up a little bit of knowledge on some of this stuff, and that's Fry is basically applying distortion to your voice. And it's something that you really have to do properly because you could easily ruin your voice. But so it does actually take quite a bit of talent to move from clean to scream, and then from scream into a Fry sort of shout, and then back up into a scream. Later on, we will actually see that progression cycle in a more complete way as he goes from cleans to bringing in some distortion for a shout to bringing in more distortion to a scream and then to a full-on black metal scream, and that's right towards the end. But it's funny how that progression works, and and when I talked about how dynamic this song was, that's a great example of that dynamic nature, because vocally it keeps you from being bored, because there are sections of the song that repeat quite a bit, and it's not until the end the song is not incredibly difficult. There's some cool guitar fills in a little bit that really keep things interesting musically speaking, but it's not like overly complicated. The last riff is quite difficult, but that's one where it really much like some of the great masters at building songs. Like when I look at like people who are extremely gifted at building a song structure, you look at like bands like Tool and Nabla Vascaris, where they will literally build a song, and it's like you can feel it being massaged all throughout the song up until this climactic moment. It's not necessarily always the end of the song, but there's a build up to a larger resolution. Anyways, so after the shout, this section's a little bit more doom inspired, and then it sort of toes the line between, like I said, that full on black metal scream and and more of a fry shout. So as we continue on, the music sort of gets more and more intense. There's double bass that's added a little bit here. We get a little bit of tremolo picking with the vocals getting more and more, black metal of an inspiration. To 240, we drop back into a clean vocal, and it's this is sort of where I kind of noticed that this song does not have like a typical song structure. And then, the song really does kind of, and I almost feel like this song was written more as a poem. When you look at David DeSantos' writing for Vector, his songs are written as a story. This song really feels like a poem, and I can't say why that particularly is, but it's the feeling that I get. I don't know whether David Gold was a poet as well. I don't know enough about the man. And we'll get into a little bit more about his story because it's a tragic one, and it's a very sad story, but it's also part of why I think Woods has become somewhat of an icon in their in sort of the extreme metal circles. They're very well respected. And this is where we get, I felt it was more of like a bridge rather than a chorus, because again, we get the double bass and we get the scream, but there's no words, it's just a scream. And like I said, this is the same progression as earlier. So in terms of a musical standpoint, it's almost more of like a bridge or chorus. It is repeated a couple times throughout the song. At 312, we get a actual growl from him, which is like a death metal. We get that, which is the first time in the song that he's really done a growl, as opposed to more of a scream. And it goes back into what I felt was a chorus, but it really isn't a chorus. It's more of the melody is more of a chorus. It is repeated again a bunch of times. And the root of this is that cool little guitar melody I was talking about. And that when you analyze that melody, the root note there is what forms the basis of the riff at the end of the song, which is great songwriting. It's very nuanced. It's pretty subtle, but it just shows, and I'll get into this at the end, how mature these guys, and this is from their, I want to say this is their second album. Yeah, this is the second album. So, these guys were fairly early on in their career. And especially when you listen to some of their later stuff, you see a progression more away from the extreme metal. This is very common, actually, I think. Moving further away from the sort of the anger and fury that you have in black metal, and moving towards more of a doom metal feel. And that's one of the reasons why Woods, I think, is tough to categorize, because they do straddle multiple genres. So, so that part there at 312 is really cool. And at 410, there's more of a straight up black metal section with some pretty consistent tremolo picking, which is unique in the song. And this is kind of what I was talking about. It really keeps you from getting bored, because without it seeming abrupt or out of place, they'll bring in these elements that will only be around for maybe 20 or 30 seconds, but then they'll quickly and very smoothly transition away from them. Because this black metal section, which is like a straight up black metal, tremolo picking, very almost that drone-like quality that you get from some of the more like true cult, black metal bands. And then moving, once again, back at at 5 minutes into more of a clean section, but this time it's got like this riff that's more of like a traditional heavy metal, not doomy. It's still a minor key riff, but it's just, it feels more up tempo, and it's like a traditional heavy metal riff, and it doesn't give you sort of some of the sense of despair or that you got from the earlier stuff. And then this again evolves into one of my favorite sections, because we're going here from a clean section, and then he layers in a Fry vocal behind it. So you have his clean vocals, and then you have that Gojira-like section with a little bit of the vocal fry on top of that. And then you move further into like a heavier riff and more of a doomy sound, and the cleans sort of drop away, and you've got this cycling up of the vocals where the clean is completely gone now. You've got the shouts, but it's moving more into a scream, and then goes into like a full on like black metal style scream, and then the riff comes in. And like I said, this was my reason, really, I think, for picking the song. I love this riff so much. It's 6 minutes. It's this, I don't really know how to describe it, or it's got a very hypnotic quality to it. And it's got a strong black metal influence, but this is what I would say more of a modern black metal influence, as opposed to your true cult tremolo picking style. This is more like a more nuanced, maybe even pagan folk black metal inspired section. And I mean, this is also something akin to what you would maybe hear from like an Old Man's Child, where there's almost a little bit of a thrash element to it, which again, maybe why I liked it so much. What I love about this section too is it's very, very nuanced. The riff continues to change in very subtle ways throughout. As the riff continues, the drumming intensifies, but the riff speeds up slightly, and then even more slightly. This is very subtle. You have to go back, really listen to it. It slows down a little bit, and then builds all the way up into like a full-on, like almost blast beat section, but the riff stays the same, right? And then you're kind of moving into, and this is, vocally speaking, this is like a full-on like black metal section here at the end. And then I think that slowdown was designed to give you a little bit of the feeling of it cycling down before that big climactic ending. You get like I said, you get the double bass, and just very, just a lot of like really fast drum work, and then it sort of just drops away into a few like doomy chords. And then my favorite part is that beautiful ending, which is just like, it really is like a coda, right? Because it's this little acoustic riff. It's not the same riff as at the beginning. Very sparse, and it's just spoken word from him. And that great line at the end, where he says, "There is no destination, there is only the journey." And so that's the song musically. And I guess that's a perfect segue into talking a little bit about the lyrics. And this is where it kind of moves into a reaction territory for me because I have not looked at the lyrics for the song intentionally. Because I know Woods is a band where the lyrics have a lot of meaning. So I wanted to kind of wait on this one to give sort of a fresh take on it. So we start with I had built up all of my hopes and all of my plans only to have them stand and cast shadows of humiliation. Days would pass, shadows would remain, a reminder of all of my dreams. I had to live humbled with the disappointment of what never came to be. And this first section here, I think is really talking about what happens. This is just basic human nature stuff. Everyone builds up hopes and dreams of what they want to achieve, and very rarely do we actually hit that mark. And I think in a way we never really do, because I think part of our nature is that we are always setting goals for ourselves that are unattainable. Like our ultimate goal is something we will probably never achieve. And I think that's just the way that humans work, we may set intentionally achievable goals for ourselves, kind of as milestones. But I think deep down we all have like an end goal, this extravagant end goal that very, very few of us ever reach. And for people who have depression or anxiety, it's sort of in those moments that, you get this, when it says it casts the shadows of humiliation, days would pass and the shadow would remain, and a reminder of all the dreams that you haven't achieved is like, and that is something that, really weighs heavy on, I think, people who are, suffer from depression, and it's unfortunately something I can't really relate to because I don't have that problem. I never have. I have a lot of empathy for people who do, because I have a lot of friends who, have dealt with depression. I've had friends that have, unfortunately, succumbed to depression, right? And it's, it's a terrible thing. And depression is different because there is a chemical component, right, to it. Everyone has feelings of hopelessness. So on that level, I can relate, But, when you talk about depression, it's a different beast, right? And no matter how much you tell somebody, who has depression, hey, it's, don't let this get you down. It's not about, and that's why it always frustrates people when, people who've never dealt with depression say stuff like, oh, just get over it, move on. It doesn't work that way, It's not the way depression works, And it really takes, I think it takes intimate knowledge, whether it's dealing with it yourself or having very close friends that deal with it, to really understand exactly what that's all about. And then it goes on to say, I vow from this day forward, my grieving will be brief, that I will continue to give to this world, knowing I may never receive. That is such a profound and simple statement, and it's something, for me, that's what really I try to live by, because, like at a certain point, I think you begin to realize that, you're going to have to give to the people around you to the world at large. And sometimes you're not going to get anything back. Sometimes you're going to get shit on. You're going to get beat down. And I mean, I haven't read all the lyrics yet, but to me, that's this section is the definition of a will to give. And you have to really say to yourself, I understand and accept the fact that this is, I'm not going to get I may not always get something out of this, I may be giving 110% and I may not get anything back. I might get 10% back. There might be days where you get that 110% back, but by and large, that's not gonna be the way it works. So that's a really profound and very simple statement. I had come so far before being stripped and sent back to the start. It felt as though the air was tearing me apart. And this is a rhyming couplet, actually, which is cool. Not something you see typically in metal. He's saying he had come, and I think that, again, this is him trying to process and understand that knowledge that, he's not going to get everything back, right? He'd really tried to move himself forward, and then things have broken him down and pushed him back. And that's the way life is, man. You take, 4 or 5 steps forward, and then sometimes you take 2 steps back, sometimes you take 5 steps back, A hybrid of seasons had come. It swept across the land. It spared the lives of everyone else, while it destroyed everything I had done. And, it's interesting. This line seems, when you look at it, on the face, to be very emo and very, poor me, this, the shit has hit me, but nobody else, right? But I think it goes a little bit deeper than that, because he's using some, seasonal imagery here, which is interesting because I have a grandmother who suffers from seasonal depressive disorder, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's something to look up. It's an extremely interesting and specific form of depression. And so what you're not sure of here is whether or not this is sort of an element of depression, or whether it's really him just sort of, kind of wallowing in self-pity, so to speak. The frost came in the night, my progress immortalized. All that I had left undone would be forever frozen in time. And again, with this imagery of winter, which for people who suffer through seasonal depressive disorder, winter is when depression takes you, right? And, it almost seems like he is suffering from, some sort of depression, whether it's a seasonal depression or whether it's bipolar disorder. It became known, I became known for this curse. It happened throughout my life. It needed to continue to occur in order to keep my legacy alive. So this almost, he's talking about a cycle, right? A cycle of depression, right? And I think that's important because depression in all of its various forms comes in cycles usually. I mean, there's very few people I've known, and I'm sure there are people out there who are depressed all the time. And I think for people who do, those are the people who are really at risk, because depression can be very, very dangerous, right? But then this next line is great because it says, before I know my time had arrived. I think that might be I think it might be supposed to be, before I had known my time had arrived. It was already gone. Cursing the cold winds of change, my moment of peace was just the eye of the storm. I'm not 100% certain on what this particular stanza is about. The will to live is easy. You can exist without a care. The will to die shows it meant so much that you shouldn't have it and you couldn't go on living without it. The will to live is easy. And I think, again, this is depression. And some of this, when you talk about suicidal depression, there's a lot of that is echoed in this line. The will to die shows it meant so much. You couldn't have it and you couldn't go on living without it. It's really, I think for people who are struggling to understand how depression works, I think this is something that is really would be informative to people who are trying to grasp a little bit of a better understanding about what is really going on, inside. Because people get really, really, really angry at, people like Chris Cornell who, after so long and, having a family and having kids and having so much success, just end their life. And this line sort of gives you a little bit of understanding about how depression can fuck with you and can make it difficult to understand certain aspects of like your life. And it's almost like a filter that's applied to everything, and this was something that, I have several friends who are bipolar. So one of my friends who was bipolar had described it almost like a filter, like a lens filter, right? Where everything suddenly gets filtered through this horribly bleak, view. And on one hand, you may say, he has a wife, he has a family, he has kids. And then on the other hand, you may say, that filter says you're a shitty husband, you're a terrible father, and it's almost, like I said, it's very difficult, I think, for people to comprehend and understand. So, the will to give makes the best of nothing. It is a philosophy that states you will continue to give to this world, knowing you may never receive. Again, this is repeated, right? Satisfaction will come, and in time, it will leave us unsatisfied. As uncertainty returns, bringing back the excitement to our lives, we can only enjoy so much stimulation before we stop responding and become despondent again. The more this goes on, the more I think, with the cyclical nature of this, and this particular stanza seems to really indicate bipolar depression, because that is really what happens almost. There's like this, when they're in a manic phase, everything is awesome, right? And then it's like it all just comes crashing down, right? I'd built up all of my hopes and all of my plans only to have them stand and cast shadows. So this part is one of the rarer parts of the song where things are repeated. And this actually, I think, is the only part that's repeated. And this is exactly the same. I had to live humbled with the disappointment of what never came to be. Those shadows will remain as landmarks of failed attempts. In their shade, I work away at building a tower of character. One day it will be revealed, and I will stand for man years. I think it's supposed to be many years. Casting a shadow of its own and striking fear in hearts, as will I. This is a statement of self-empowerment here, attempting to provide a statement of self-empowerment. It is discomfort that sets us apart, that wakes us up, that puts us to sleep. It is our pathetic moments which make us desire to be great. It is the starving itself that makes us hungry to want more. Over time, as you learn to fall, you'll rise to your feet faster than the time before. Satisfaction is a peak on the verge of decline. It will be over in the blink of an eye. Take your time to feel every moment. A gradual climb will let you enjoy it. For your life is measured by the degree of dynamics from your life to your death. The wait is long and the wait goes on, but it is better to travel hopefully than to arrive. Through the crests and troughs, I will have seen both sides. By the pursuit of the sun and the allure of the earth, it's the title of the album, by the way, I will have earned and spent my life, the will to give. And then the coda at the end, there is no destination, there is only the journey. I didn't want to interrupt those last 5 stanzas because I think you really need to take them all as a whole, because this, as a larger element, the last 3 lines aside, is really a poem of self-empowerment. And, you know, it seems like this is what, like when you finally, when I like, again, it's difficult for me because I haven't dealt with it, but if you're bipolar or you're dealing with depression and you realize what you're dealing with, and you're like, and you kind of make a statement to yourself and say, this is life. This is what I have to deal with. This is the hand that I've been dealt, and I'm going to make the most of it, you know? And it doesn't mean that I'm not going to have times where I just can't deal with the world. But, you know, I mean, so much of this song, there are parts of this song that I can't relate to. But at the end, this song is really, for me, my personal statement of life. I mean, what David is saying here is really, to me, the way that I look at life. I mean, you know, you have to give, you know, you have to understand that life is going to be shit, that you're not, you know, people are not going to return the love and the care that you're giving always, you know. And then, so that is the song breakdown. And I wanted to really just very briefly at the end of this reaction, I wanted to mention that, you know, Woods had a 9-year career. It started in 2002, and in 3 days before Christmas, David Gold, the lead singer and you know, kind of the architect of the band, died in an automobile accident. He was only 31, and the band made the decision that that was it. Much like I draw a lot of parallels between this and Windir, or Windir, however you want to pronounce it, whether you want to go with a more Germanic pronunciation or not. But Windier and Woods are somewhat linked in the fact that you had these, in both cases, singers who talked a lot about life affirmment, but dealing with struggles and trying to get past your struggles. And then in the end, their life was snuffed out. In a very unfair way. In the case of Valfar, the man, I mean, you could barely even call him a man. He was only 25, I think, and terrible losses on both counts, because these were both musically and lyrically very important bands that had a lot to say, and those voices, unfortunately, have both been silenced. And I think sometimes you have bands who are able to say so much that's important in such a short time, that while their legacy may have been cut short, it makes their music that they did give us all that much more important. So, and it's cool to see too that the band was given a posthumous Juno Award in 2013 for Woods 5, which was their final album. So that's really it for this review. Bit of a downer at the end, but I would definitely encourage people to really explore this band. Even if you're not a fan of extreme metal, if you like the cleaner parts of these songs, that's a lot of what Woods is. The extreme metal actually is a lot less common. This song appealed more to me, and it's ironic that lyrically the meaning was so important to me. So I would definitely say check these guys out, regardless of what style of metal you like, because you're probably going to find something that you enjoy. And these guys were really masters of the craft. This was their second album that this was off of. This is incredibly intelligent songwriting, incredibly intelligent lyricism, and what more can you say? I think that pretty much says it all. So that's it for right now. This has been a relatively long review. Keep your eyes peeled for some other stuff. There's 2 other songs, like I said, that I want to get to this week if I can. So, but realistically speaking, I know it is Friday, so I don't know whether we'll get to them both or not. But I should be able to get at least one more done this week before we move into next week. So, good to be back. Stay metal, everybody. And remember, if you are dealing with depression, and I know that it doesn't mean a ton, the words don't really mean a ton, but I'm going to say them anyway. Somewhere somebody holds you in extremely high regard. I'm not going to say loves you, because that's arbitrary. It could be somebody who really just respects you and thinks that you are the best at what you do, whatever that may be. So, and I think sometimes that's important to say, whether or not it really holds any meaning. But as this song indicates, for me, the will to give is important. So I'm giving you those words. Do with them what you will. Calendros out. Stay metal, everybody.